Okay, here we are. It is September 5th. It's Tuesday, September 5th, 2023. We are here today not to really discuss the Trump RICO indictment.
Or Young Thug.
Or Young Thug's RICO indictment, both of which are currently in Fulton County. But to discuss a third and brand new RICO indictment that was apparently brought by the Attorney General's office, not by the Fulton County District Attorney. So,
which raises some interesting questions. So
let's talk about
what we have is a filed RICO indictment against I'll call it the Stop Cop City crowd. It was filed August 28, 2023.
But it was just released today.
Just
it's not
released today. We've
today.
been checking, and about an hour ago we could get a copy of the indictment downloaded from the clerk's webpage. What's interesting is there's no grand jurors named in the pleading. Now, I don't know if there's an amendment coming or what, but always you see the names of 18 to 23 grand jurors, and none of them, not one, is on here. The other is the document, the indictment, appears to not be brought by the District Attorney of Fulton County. The indictment's returned in Fulton County, but it's brought by the Attorney General, Chris Carr, which certainly raises issues on why he's bringing the indictment, he being the Attorney General, why the District Attorney of Fulton County, Fannie Willis, didn't bring the indictment.
And whether there's any sort of communication between them on how that's going to work.
Or whether Fannie said, I'm not going to do it. Sherry Boston in DeKalb County has apparently taken the high road after she had numerous individuals locked up and government moving to deny bond. Sherry Boston came to her senses and said, I'm having no part of this.
And we should talk about what Cop City really is, I think, first, for people who don't know. So there's an area in DeKalb, so it's in DeKalb County. DeKalb County and Fulton County both encompass parts of Atlanta.
Part of the city, the municipality.
So there is a proposed structure that's going to be, a $500 billion Cop City that the Atlanta Police Foundation and others are going to be privately funding to create a city. That's why it's called Cop City, where I guess police officers and law enforcement can come to do training in the areas of marksmanship and shooter on the loose. Basically, it'd be like a GI Joe jungle gym for militarized law enforcement activities, and it's in a predominantly African American neighborhood. Number one, but number two, it's on land that I guess there's forests, there's trees, and so in the indictment, as we'll discuss, they don't call them Stop Cop City; they call them Defend Atlanta Forests, and I think that that's really important. Just to start with, that they're prosecuting a group that they're saying committed all these crimes. The group being called Defend Atlanta Forests.
Yeah, that says a lot. What it really is a group of predominantly white, young, males,
highly educated,
males and females, a lot of highly educated individuals that are ecologically conscious and ecologically concerned. They are concerned about global warming. They are concerned about misuse of this particular piece of forest land, which incidentally has a unique history in Atlanta. It's on the site of the old Atlanta prison farm, and it was Indian territory, and I believe it's a floodplain. So it's got a lot of interesting historical aspects to it, and concerns that we don't need more police training in an area that has a sordid past.
And so there's actually many groups, including Defend Atlanta Forests, as a group. And I wouldn't say they're even an organization. It's like a group of people with some common ideas. But there's people who are anti, defund the police. That's a group. And then there's Defend Atlanta Forests. And there's other groups that have common interests in Cop City not being built.
And stopping the construction.
And so what happened was in the past year, basically it started about a year ago, right? I mean, November or December of 2023. Or 2022, I'm sorry. But so what happened is that there were confrontations between police and individuals who were accused of, I guess, living camping out
in the woods
and refusing to leave on behalf of Defend Atlanta forest, on behalf of the forest, on behalf of what they believe in. They were protesting.
Yeah.
They're protesters.
So let's keep it as clear as we can. There have been some acts of property damage. Earth-moving equipment, very large construction equipment, has been firebombed. And also, there was an incident on Peachtree Street in the city of Atlanta where there was a march and a protest that concerned the shooting of one of the protesters at the forest, and a police car was set on fire.
Yes.
So there's a couple isolated incidents where there was some property damage.
But there's been no serious injury to any law enforcement officer. Property only, and there was a protester who was at the site of possible Cop City, and that individual was shot, I think, more than 40 times by law enforcement.
Yeah, shot and killed.
I think it's really important to note that, because it's just so ironic that the police are fighting to have this piece of property vacated so that they can practice better marksmanship and play with their guns, when, quite honestly, as it relates, I don't believe in defunding the police. I just believe in properly funding aspects of law enforcement that further their protecting and serving of our communities. And
Yeah.
so what's shocking is that kid, they had no problem putting that many bullets into him. And so it does in my mind bring back the question of what do these law enforcement agencies need another place to shoot and
Another
practice
facility.
shooting.
Yeah. So let me go back to the individuals that are named in this indictment. There's 61 of them. I've had the pleasure to meet several of them, many of them, and for the most part, they are completely innocuous, law-abiding young ideologues that have a certain belief system. And part of their conduct, which is accused of being a RICO act, multiple RICOs act, is camping out in the woods, building a tree fort, and not coming down when you're ordered to by a swarm of GBI and APD officers. It's absolutely
To protect the trees.
to protect the trees. It's absolutely nuts.
And you have to ask yourselves, would law enforcement bring in tanks? Would they bring in, they were going to war on their property. There's pictures of it in the news where they're bringing in tanks and armory and just tons of law enforcement. Ask yourselves, would they be doing that if that piece of land was not going to be used for their own activities? If it was going to be a library, if it was going to be an old folks' home, they wouldn't be in the woods trying to pick off these kids.
Wouldn't.
And so it's important that there's a conflict of interest, because the AG's office, my understanding, isn't Chris Carr going to run for governor?
Well, so look, the indictment, which we discussed a little earlier, the indictment doesn't say Fannie Willis or an assistant district attorney in Fulton County. It's signed by Attorney General Chris Carr. So this guy's got gubernatorial aspirations.
He does. Okay, yeah, that's what I was thinking.
So this is just a scam, a publicity stunt by this fella to be tough on crime, to lock up the criminal violators and run a campaign on it. And when you read this document, it's got 100 and some odd pages. It's absolutely nonsense.
Yeah, they're talking about anarchy.
It's like Joe McCarthy visits Fulton County. Now they're collectivism. It's all anti-communist jazz in this document. It's absolutely foolish, and they allege some absolutely ridiculous overt acts in furtherance of the RICO conduct, like walking down the street with a backpack with a firecracker in it. That's a criminal act, according to this document that Chris Carr brought. Trespassing in the forest when there's a no trespassing sign. Now you're a felon. It's absolutely...
you throw shrimp. You're accused of throwing
Shrimp.
raw shrimp at a law enforcement
You had that
officer.
case, right?
I had that. Yeah, they accuse her of felony obstruction of law enforcement. It's outrageous. And here's the other part that's kind of crazy. So as we've said, some of these acts that they're alleging possibly occurred in DeKalb at the site of Cop City. Others occurred at protests in Fulton County.
Oh, this is interesting. You're talking about the DeKalb dispositions?
Well, yeah, I'm talking about the DeKalb dispositions. They had charged them with domestic terrorism in DeKalb County. But what we have now are people charged in both courts. So there are people who
For the same conduct.
for the same conduct, for the same exact conduct. So now people who we represented in DeKalb are now being accused of, in addition to what they had been accused of before, now they're accused of racketeering, which is another charge. And so the question becomes whether there are grand jury warrants that were taken out against these defendants who have already bonded out for the same conduct, just in a different county, and if they're going to be forced to turn themselves back in to a jail system that, if any of you want to go Google Fulton County Jail and hit news, what you're going to see is that there is a despicable pattern of civil rights violations. It's not a safe place. It's why all the defendants got out on consent bonds, which
all
I
but
don't.
one.
All but one.
Happened to be an African American guy.
Because of Judge Richardson, but that person's now out. But the fact of the matter is that it seems that an already crumbling system that is truly. I mean, there were people dying over there this weekend, stabbing, people using parts of the wall to create shanks to kill each other. To add 60 more people to this. 61. Sorry, to add 61 people back into that system. When right now, in the past 3 or 4 months, I haven't heard a word about Cop City.
Yeah,
things have really settled down.
Well, they settled down because there's a backstory to this, which was this first wave of arrests. They're a domestic terrorist. Sherry Boston and the DeKalb DA's office cooperated with the Attorney General's office, Chris Carr, and then apparently the light went off in her head and said, "We can't do this. This is an exaggeration. It's an abuse of the criminal process system, criminal justice system. It's clogging the courts with nonsensical cases." So Sherry Boston made a public announcement she's not prosecuting them. So we thought, as lawyers, well, okay, these cases are just going to die on the vine because they weren't real criminal acts anyway.
I'm surprised. I want to know what grand jurors said on this case because I feel like in Fulton County and DeKalb County there's such a division. I mean, in the same way that there's signs that say Black Lives Matter and anti-hate, everybody, there's Stop Cop City everywhere.
Yeah,
if you
all
look,
over town.
it's all over town. Like, we're not the only ones who know about it or care about it. It's a movement within not just the black community.
Legal.
Yeah, I mean, there's people. It's all over Candler Park and
Yeah.
Druid Hills and everywhere. Stop Cop City. People all over the country, actually. I mean, and that's what we're finding is that there are individuals who came from other parts of the country to protest what they see as like a despicable use of land.
And money.
And resources, and in the process hurting the environment and taking away green space.
But let me just get back to this issue with DeKalb County. So the DeKalb County makes this the DeKalb County District Attorney's Office makes this public announcement. We're not going to cooperate with this prosecution. And I'm paraphrasing it. So we all think that the case is dying on the vine, that it's going away.
Oh.
But getting back to the political aspirations of the Attorney General, Chris Carr, apparently it is not dying on the vine. They now need a new venue. They need to find a statute where they can cross county and jurisdictional lines. So they come up with the darling of the 1923 or 2023 and make it a RICO case.
Okay.
These same kids that are camping in the bushes and walking down the street with a backpack are now charged with RICO.
Okay. A few updates. Number one, apparently the AG's office moved to seal the names of the grand jurors, which to me is it signals that the defendants wouldn't be able to handle that information without doing something with it, which is people were up in arms that the grand jurors in the Donald Trump RICO case, that their information was put on the internet, and by asking to seal.
So a judge in Fulton County signed that?
Apparently, because it's not there.
Yeah, it surprises me that somebody would sign that type of request.
Also, it does seem as though that the AG's office is going to be requiring all the defendants to turn themselves in with a deadline, and that the amount of bond is going to vary. So even the people who've already
been arrested, posted bond, now have to do it again. Well, we need to find out who's in charge and get consent bonds for everybody, because this is just an abusive process, really.
Apparently over 100 search warrants, terabytes of discovery, and saying that this trial will go on forever. Okay, meanwhile, in Fulton County Jail, people are sitting for years, waiting for their day in court, waiting for trial, having been waiting before COVID, people in jail before COVID, now still having to be pushed aside because now we're going to have 1, 2, 3 courtrooms,
with RICO.
criminal courtrooms completely clogged for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
And apparently the prosecutor doesn't have an idea about how he actually wants to resolve it. I mean, the Attorney General's office doesn't know how they're going to handle it.
This would be a great case for everybody to say, I'm not guilty, I'm not going to play your game, I'm not going to be intimidated to a plea bargain
Just hold it out.
for criminal trespass, for probation, and just hold it out and make Chris Carr eat his indictment publicly, because it's a miscarriage of justice. Those individuals that, if the state can prove that legitimately damaged or illegitimately damaged property,
criminal damage to
property,
interference with
prosecute
government
them.
property,
But
whatever.
protesting, exercising your First Amendment rights, calling them collectivists and communists,
and calling the people who are donating money to this cause,
and
then there's the people who are taking that money, and I don't know how they're claiming that they misused it, but to say that people who are assisting in taking in donations to then help these individuals who have now been accused and charged with all this stuff. I mean, it's going so far, and that's what as attorneys who accepted legal fees from these individuals who are now being charged with money laundering for basically like similar conduct, or just how far is this going to go? That basically you can't, if you don't support the police, you're all going down.
You're a criminal. So what Rachel's talking about is this RICO indictment has many counts charging individuals who supported individuals to get out of jail, who may have helped with raising money for bonds, may have helped them with hiring an attorney. These individuals are now indicted multiple times in multiple counts in the indictment.
Serious
with
criminal charges.
Predicate acts in support of a RICO violation. And that is that by helping someone who's exercising their right to assemble, their right to speak, their right to protest, that by supporting them in exercising these rights, these individuals have now engaged in a criminal conspiracy. And again, you're getting into this communist motive, which is in the indictment, which is bizarre.
Yeah, and they're calling them like a mob treaty. It doesn't take, and as we were talking about this before, there may have been some property damage. The individuals that engaged in that behavior
Criminally responsible.
Yeah, they should be held accountable. However, it doesn't take 61 people to light a few cars on fire or throw a Molotov cocktail. Right. And so all of these people did not agree to a common criminal purpose. They may have common core values. They may believe if you believe Cop City is wrong, and you're on the indictment, there's going to be tens of thousands of people on the indictment. How far are you going to go? Do you speak up against Cop City? Are you going down too? I mean, it's insane.
Liken it to the civil rights movement, where people assembled, maybe without a permit, to petition their government for grievances, which they believed was not in the best interest of their group or their society or their city, and turning all those people into criminals. And that's what this overbroad, overreaching, really illegal document called the RICO indictment has done.
And to make them all turn themselves back into this jail, I can't.
Yeah.
And pay another bond, and put all these RICO defendants in the Young Thug case, in the Trump case, and now in this case, which has more defendants than both of them, I think combined. Yeah. So when we're looking at hiring an attorney for something like this, they're putting these defendants in an incredibly compromising financial position, because an attorney cannot agree to get involved in this case.
Disrupting their careers.
It's going to take years. It is a full-time job. And most people don't have the money to just hire an attorney for a salary, like a salary. I mean, this is going to take a while.
Year or two.
It's taken 9 months for them to qualify 25 jurors in the Young Thug case. I don't even know if they're at that number yet. Okay, qualifying jurors to then be considered, to then be struck to create a jury. They have not even picked a jury in 8 months. So it's going to take 2 years. It's going to take a lot longer. We should finish by speaking really quick about who this case is assigned to.
Well, let me just note that the case was originally signed to Scott McAfee, who's been a judge just several months, who received by the wheel, we call it, the Donald Trump or the Fulton 19 or the Trump Mafia family RICO case. So it came out of the wheel, it being this most recent forest case, Defend the Forest, to Scott McAfee. Scott McAfee has recused himself because he worked as a division of the Attorney General's office. I think it's called the Division of Inspector General, and he stated in his order that he had worked on this case or was aware of factors involved in this case when he was employed at the Inspector General's office. So he recused himself. So, Rachel, who gets the case now?
The Honorable Judge Kimberly Esmond Adams. Kimberly Esmond Adams has been on the bench for more than 10 years, maybe 20 years, more than 20 years.
Well, no, 10, but...
10?
Yeah.
She's a character, and she is somebody who, what did I call her? An equal opportunity, what did I say?
Well...
Some bad word. Listen to me. This woman, she runs her courtroom very strictly. She can be seen as disrespectful because she doesn't want to be called ma'am. She has like some certain housekeeping rules that are a little bit, she's a little bit stringent on that. Like if you're not regularly in her courtroom, it feels like the target's moving and you're just getting hit. But I also believe that she's someone who's an equal opportunity version of that. She's not just a prosecutor on the bench who's just bullying defense attorneys. I think she's going to have a lot of questions about this indictment.
I do too. Let me add this about Judge Kimberly Adams. She's very bright. She's a graduate of Notre Dame Law School. She's very strict, and I'll be surprised if she takes kindly to what the Attorney General has done here. She's also African American. So there's a sense here, like, are we now just moving the targets from the backs of Black Americans to young environmentalist Americans? And Kimberly Adams will see through all the nonsense that the Attorney General brings here.
Like someone threw shrimp at an officer, I'm not doing this.
Yeah. She's going to say that's not a felony.
And so I was thinking it may actually move quicker because she's not going to mess around.
Yeah, she does not fool around, and she'll give you a fair trial. Judge Adams is a very honorable and fair jurist. As Rachel said, it's a moving target. I mean, she'll hammer you as a defense lawyer, but when the state brings up nonsensical charges or overreaches or overprosecutes,
she'll slam them just
she'll
as hard.
call it. So I don't have any problems with Judge Adams taking the case.
No, but I'm very interested to see how it will be handled.
It'll play out well.
Unlike Judge McAfee, it likely won't be televised or recorded. She's not, in my experience, I don't think she live streams her cases or anything.
I don't know. I'd like it to be, though.
Me too, because it's going to get wild. So stay tuned.
Okay, we'll pick it up, get into the substantive acts later, and it's always a pleasure. See you next time.